Turning to China, as the world's fastest growing major economy by far, China's ability to maintain strong growth is key to the global outlook. Uri, growth in China slowed this year. What's your sense of whether growth in China has bottomed?
I'm gonna step outside of the persona I've had so far in this interview and say that China is a place where I actually think is going to get better next year. So my sense is that things are improving there already, especially given how bad this year is going to come in. I don't know what odds I'd put on it, but I think that China may be one of the few places, significant places around the globe, where you're actually going to see better growth in 13 than you saw in 12.
Patty, do you agree with Uri's outlook for China? And what would that mean for multinational companies that derive a chunk of sales from China? Companies like Yum Brands and Tiffany's that have actually seen sales slow in China recently.
I do agree with his take. I do think that China is going to come around, and it's really a sociological phenomenon. You've got one man supporting not only his wife and child, but also both of their parents. They've got to have the growth. They need to get the economy going. They've got new leadership in China. All of this is going to feed into them doing anything and everything they can to keep that economy going. It'll probably be good for some of the lower end multinationals that would be in China. Specifically, we're playing that through Starbucks, and the growth in Starbucks should be phenomenal. Yum Brands, once again, that's really a play on KFC. I think that'll be fine. Tiffany, I think Tiffany's got some other issues going on, and so I wouldn't be buying Tiffany just for the China exposure. What I'd really be looking at, though, is the peripheral emerging markets that are actually tied into China and will benefit from their growth.
Uri, what will China's transition in leadership bring?
Well, I think it will, as was suggested previously, I think it's going to be very, very important for them to get off on the right foot. And the way I always analyze China is simply this: the only thing, in my opinion, that can create regime change there is if the people aren't being fed. And if people take to the streets, that's really the only thing that's going to bring down communism in China. Otherwise, I think everything's going to move along as it's done. They've sort of handled the transition brilliantly. You go to the large cities, you're like in any world capital, as long as people who live in Shanghai, Beijing, and 15 other places don't want to organize, government kind of lets them do what they want commercially. It's a little different, in the rural areas, but again, there isn't a spiritual fervor for democracy there, in my opinion. They want to feed their families. And so that's always job one of the government. It's job one of this government. I think that they will risk inflation in order to have very high employment and very good GDP growth. And that's why I think you'll see a number north of 7.5% next year, precisely because it's a new government. And if it was 8% or better, it wouldn't surprise me at all.